Check. Okay, we're just gonna give it a few more minutes to let people trickle in. See if we need to pull out any more chairs. It's nicer to do that. They're really loud, so it's nicer to do that when we're not talking. And then we'll get rolling. Thank you, guys. Okay, live is rolling and we're okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Crocker, and I am the director here at the Albany County Public Library. We really want to thank you all for being here with us tonight. Partnering with the League of Women Voters each election year to host these candidate forums is always a real true delight and highlight for me. It fits perfectly with the mission of the Albany County Public Library, which is to build meaningful connections, to inspire growth, to cultivate curiosity, and to enhance community. And we feel like this is one of the ways that we check all of those boxes. So I wanted to give a big thanks to the League of Women Voters for all they do to put these candidate forums together, all they do to help inform voters and encourage voting in our community. We think that's really important and valuable. A special thanks to Kaylin Brooks for everything that she has done. She's pulled together a huge portion of the logistics for these evenings, and they literally would not have happened this summer without her, and we greatly appreciate everything that she has done. I also want to give a big thanks to our library staff members who have figured out all of the logistics and the technology and all of those great things for us. And of course, want to thank you all for joining us here in person and joining us virtually. We value your presence in our community, and we value your participation here. And finally, I want to give a big thanks to the candidates. Thank you for your willingness and your time and your effort to serve our community. So, there's my thank yous. A few logistics that I want to keep in mind. We are live streaming this event, and the video then will be immediately posted and available as well. So for the audience, please pardon our camera in the center. That is what is allowing all of our online community members to be with us. Also, on a logistics note to the moderator and to the candidates, please remember that the mics are really, really important. They matter for the people in the room, here in the back, but they are essential to the people online. If you're not talking into a mic, our people online can't hear you. So please remember, and we'll wave at you and yell at you if you're not. But, it's nice to not have to do that interruption. Also, just finally, for an apology of the heat has caught up with us. We're cranking some air conditioning. I'm watching my phone. As if you see me open doors, it's simply because the temperature outside has dropped below the temperature in this room, and I'm gonna try to promote some air circulation. So thanks and especially candidates, thank you, and I'm sorry. You guys don't know this. They do actually have amongst the best shot and actually might have the best position in the room. So we did that on purpose. So thank you guys all. I'm really excited for this evening. I'm now going to hand it over to Lampina from the Laramie League of Women Voters to give us a few more details.
Will you wave your hand at me when I get away from the mic?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Actually, Riley will.
Oh, okay, Riley. My name is Lynn Ipina, and I'm the president of the Laramie League of Women Voters. Welcome to this, our fourth out of 6 public forums for the primary candidates. First, on behalf of the League, the Laramie League, thanks go to the Public Library for being our partner. And special thanks go to Rachel, whom you just met, and Riley, who got his hair cut just like I did, okay? And he's the library's new tech specialist. And if you've ever seen any of our old videos, you'll know the difference that Riley has made and the equipment that, the county has invested in. It looks so good online. We're really lucky. Another person that Rachel mentioned is Kaylin. Where are you, Kaylin? I'm going to make her stand up. Come on. There she is. All right, so she is an intern with the Laramie League this election season. She recently finished a tour with the American Corps Service with the United Way here in town, and she previously worked for the Larimer County League of Women Voters in Colorado. So she knew what she was in for when she signed up with us. She also recently graduated from CSU with a political science degree, and she has a strong interest in voter education. So thank you, Rachel. Not only your hard work, but your good work and your bright and new ideas. You will notice that this time around, Ann is the only veteran moderator that we've called back. That may change for the general election, but I asked Kaylin to make our moderator pool younger, and so she has. All right, so all of the 2022 candidate forums are going to be hybrid format like this one, although this time all of our candidates are present. So typically we have the audience here in the library, which is huge. If you all could, anybody count us? It's usually around 25 or 30, but you're much more than 25 or 30. These events are live streamed and recorded to YouTube, and you can view the last three on the library site and on the League's Facebook site. They're up almost immediately. There was a small delay this time, but then it was very small. A new feature, and this is, it protects all of our candidates and it protects me. If you get too far from the mic, you know, nobody can hear you. But YouTube has a new feature and it's been hooked up for our recordings. And there's a little menu right under the image. And at the far right, ... you know, meaning there's more to come. If you click on the dots, you'll find choose transcript. And let me say the transcript program is really good. And it helps a lot. Anyway, so you've got that option. I lost my place. Oh, yes. There are also recordings on Laramie's public access TV. And we think of that as the way that people who don't have an internet connection or a very good one where they work or at home, you can always go to public TV. It's channel 191, and they'll be showing the forums daily from 8 to 1, if you can imagine. And Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 7 p.m. And they'll do that until the general election. And I think if you just Google, what did I Google? City of Laramie TV, something like that, and it came right up. All right, so as you may know, tonight's forum is mostly about candidates for the county sheriff's office, and not the least of whom is the one candidate for the county attorney. Right? They'll introduce themselves in a minute. So let me begin also this forum with a little bit of information about the primary and a few words about the forum. All right, so the primary election is August 16. Polling places will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Absentee voting began, 3 weeks ago on July 1. And I'm not sure it's the only one, but Albany County might be the only county in the state that has a drop box. And it's under camera, it's a camera supervision 24/7, and it's over on the east side of the courthouse. Anyway, I like to use that. There are so many ways that you now, this year, can get voter information and an absentee ballot if you want to go that route. First of all, you live in Wyoming, and you can change anything on the day of the election, which is rare. If you're registered and not making any changes to your voting information, you can just go online to the Secretary of State's website. He's got an online ballot request, no signatures required. I did that, and mine took about a week to get to my house. Once it arrives and you've made your choices, which I haven't yet because I wanted to finish the forms, you can mail it in, take it in, drop it in the drop box, but be sure you turn it in by August 15th. If you don't, just take that ballot with you to the poll. You can use it there. If you have to register or make changes, probably the best thing to do is just go to the city clerk's office in the courthouse right over here, or call. She can do an amazing amount of, or she can be very helpful by just calling. Now, I warn you that your polling place may have changed. Mine did. I'm over in the Lincoln Community Center. I've never been over in the Lincoln Community Center before. We do have some lovely maps of the various wards of the city. And unlike the ones that are published, you can actually tell what the names of the streets are on those maps. I just use my phone and zoom in. But one way or another, you want to inform yourself and not go to the polling place you always used. If you're a registered voter in the county, you should have gotten a postcard from the county clerk. But my partner, Al, and I, we both did, and I couldn't tell you where that postcard is now for lots of money. Maybe you've lost yours too, but it informed you that, you had a new polling place. Let's see, is there anything more? No. We also have some sample ballots over on this table, the pink ones. Don't take them. They are our only copies. But now you don't really need to look at our ballots or write down what your ballot will look like. There are so many places, including the Secretary of State's website, and vote411.org is the League of Women Voters national site to facilitate information and about candidates and also about your elections. If you go on and just type in your address, it will tell you what your ballot will look like, and it'll tell you your polling place. It'll tell you the hours. I mean, everything is there. But if you want to get a glimpse of your ballot now, the pink copies are over there. I do want to warn you that some races are partisan, and only candidates that are in the party you register with will appear on your ballot. The general election, it's different, right? It's just all one big ballot. I think I got mine on Saturday. Some people got theirs on Sunday, but the 2022 primary voter guide is out. It appeared as an insert in the Laramie Boomerang. Some copies have been distributed around town, like the Epson Center. The library has one here. We're going to get it put on the back table if you want to look at it. You can buy a copy from the Boomerang in their main office. I've forgotten what the hours are. It was sort of like 10 to 1. That's it. Thank you very much. 10 to 1. And they cost $3. Now, one of our members Xeroxed all 70 pages of that voter guide, and that cost her $10. So there's a real savings to be had if you want to have your own printed version. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to get a copy posted online simply because of the copyright issues with the library or with the Boomerang, but we'll see. All right, so at this time, I'd like to take the opportunities to ask if there are any candidates for other offices, not sheriff, not county attorney, in our audience. If you'd please stand, introduce yourself, and say either what office you're running for or what office you occupy. Thank you.
I'm Sally Keene, I'm running for Alpha County Board.
Thank you, Sally. Anyone else? Oh.
I'm Carly Provenza, your representative for House District 45. I'm Karen O'Doherty, I'm running for Ward 3 City Council again.
Thank you, Aaron.
Brandon Newman, running for City Council Ward 2.
Brian Schuster, running for House District 14.
Thank you, Brian. And I'll give a shout out to Brandon. Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you. Now I'll give a shout out to Brandon's Facebook page. It's all about the League of Women Voters. So if you want to know more about us, go to his Facebook page. Anyway, I think that's it. So I want to thank you all for being here, and to the audience. We'll begin tonight's forum with questions for the candidates. Let me assure you, all these questions that are up here that our moderator has recently tried to organize came from real people. 5 questions were emailed to me at the League web email site address. we've already gotten many contributions from you, and along the way, if you have a question, write it on a pad of paper. There are pads and pencils or pens out at the end of each row, and just raise your hand and someone from the league will come around, pick it up, and bring it up here to the moderator. Questions, if you do ask a question, remember to direct it to every candidate for that position, not just one person. And each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a question to our candidates. Our timekeepers are Jamie Egolf and Al Tremblay. Where is he? Oh, right over there against the wall. They'll signal you by holding up cards. And we count down from 90 seconds. So when you see stop, it's really stop. To everyone, the moderator may edit questions for clarity or combine two related questions. We couldn't possibly get through all the ones we have already. And it's her choice to ask follow-up questions, or maybe it's a short question, so she'll give less time, and is an experienced moderator. So let me introduce our moderator. Ann Alexander is Vice Provost for Strategic Planning and Initiatives at the University of Wyoming. She earned her PhD in economics at UW, her master's and her BBA in economics at New Mexico State University. Dr. Alexander's research and teaching foci are on the history of American capitalism, international economics, and health economics. She regularly speaks to statewide audiences and state and national media about the status of Wyoming, the U.S., and global economies. She has authored several publications on the political and economic impacts of transboundary pandemics and the productivity effects of various diseases. Prior to her position in academic affairs, she has served as UW interim provost, vice provost for undergraduate education, director of international programs, associate dean of outreach, and she's also served as a resources economist in the U.S. Department of State, assistant dean of the UW College of Business, and director of the Interdisciplinary Health Economics Policy Center at UW. And I've known Ann for a while, and I wanted to look up something new. So here's my little new thing. I don't know how many of you know this, but Ann's hometown is Cloudcroft. Anybody heard of it? New Mexico? And there are about 700 people who live there, but the astounding thing is it's higher than Laramie. So she was born at 8,668 feet above sea level. But I would say I used to live in La Paz, Bolivia, and that's at 14,000 feet above sea level. So, yeah, well, I'm inviting you to come to La Paz with me sometime, and we'll see what altitude really is. All right, so I'm going to turn things over to our moderator. Be nice, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, so yeah, the moral of the story here is that both Lynn and I can outlast all of you when it comes to talking. So, but we have until 8:30 for all of these gentlemen who have devoted their time this evening to answering your questions, to start answering your questions. So I will leap right into it and say thank you to you all for coming tonight. Really appreciate you investing the time with us. And the first question is hopefully a simple one. Just give us your name, your race that you are running in, and your party affiliation. Just so you know, I will alter the order of answering every time, so no one has to go first all the time. Unfortunately, I believe that you might have to go first all the time in all of your questions, and last. So let us start here with Mr. I am going to mess it up now. I practiced it. Britzius.
That's very good. My name is Kurt Britzius. I am with the Albany County Attorney's Office. I'm running for county attorney, and I'm registered Democrat.
Good evening. My name's Joel Senior. I'm a candidate for Albany County Sheriff. I'll be on the Republican ticket.
Hi there, I'm Kurt Moore. I'm on the Democratic ticket running for sheriff, Albany County.
I'm Zeb Gladney. I'm on the Democratic ticket as well, running for the Albany County Sheriff's Office.
I'm Rafael Delgadillo. I'm running for Republican for the Sheriff's Office.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Applehans. I'm your current sheriff, and I am on the Democratic ticket for re-election.
Wonderful. I think I will start with a question that everyone could answer. And so I will start with this question for all candidates. And we'll start, again, in the same order, and then I promise we'll start swapping. You'll go first next, and then you'll go first next, and so on. But for all candidates, how much deference should the county attorney give to law enforcement in determining whether or not to bring criminal charges against someone and in negotiating plea agreements? And if anyone needs that repeated, I'm happy to do so. Please go ahead, Mr. Britzius.
Thank you. When the prosecutor's office is working with law enforcement in the initial stages of whether or not to charge, we're actively engaged in gathering evidence, and it is, a collaborative effort to try to get to where we need to be, to where we think we have a case that we can actually prove at trial and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In plea negotiations, the prosecutor, particularly in larger cases where law enforcement has invested a lot of resources, should talk to law enforcement, get their input, and also, if it's a victim matter, talk to the victim, get their input, so you have as much input from all the concerned parties. But in the end, a prosecutor cannot ethically give its discretion away. We must make the decision in the end. The prosecutor's role is to be administrator of justice, and we have to come up with the best plea negotiation or plea offer that we can. And in the end, that has to be our decision, though law enforcement should always be consulted in those larger cases. And their opinions do mean something. And we should always be communicating in a productive and a nice way, I guess I should say. It should always be respectful. And we're lucky here in Albany County because that actually happens. In other jurisdictions, that's not the case. But I believe law enforcement in the county attorney's office has a very good communication avenue at this point, and I think that is being done, but done in a responsible way.
Do you get as close as you can to the microphone for our online audience?
I think Kurt's answer was very well laid out. In my experience here in Albany County, working with the county attorney's office, the communication between them and law enforcement has generally been very good. I think it's important that that communication starts early. That way, if there is more work that needs done on a case, to make it prosecutable and more likely at being able to get a guilty verdict on that case, then that needs to be communicated with law enforcement. And I also feel that it's extremely important that the victims be brought in throughout the entire process so they understand the decisions that are being made and are part of those decisions and allowed to give their input as to where they want to see the case go.
Thank you. Mr. Senior?
I think you're going to get a lot of similar responses to these questions. I agree with both of them. We have a very good program here. I think we all work great together with the county attorney, the police department, the sheriff's office. Everybody works well depending on what case is going forward. Certainly, victims need to be consulted. It's not as easy as we're just going to work this deal out. And we have a great crime victim witness program here. Recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, I guess, they actually call us in as officers or whoever's working the case, and we meet with the victims. And it's yes, you meet with them initially, and you're doing things as your investigation's ongoing, but it's really good to see what it means to them and that you're making a difference for them. So a lot of good things are going on in this county. I'm always amazed at just the size of Laramie and the resources we have available for victims and how well everybody works together.
Yeah, I'll second that fourth that, whatever. We've had a great working relationship with the attorney's office ever since I've been working at the sheriff's office. It's not uncommon for us to call up an attorney. You know, we're working a case, whether it be misdemeanor, felony case, you know, run it past them, what we got, what intelligence we're working with, and we work together to establish a decision. And we also work together to figure out what steps need to be taken in the future so that victims' identity, victims in general are protected, and those crimes are investigated to the fullest and as efficiently as possible with the resources that we have. I've always enjoyed working with them, and I hope that we can continue this relationship well into the future.
The sheriff should have a very good working relationship with the county attorney. The first thing we have to do is make sure that the initial crime reports are well written, that the crime elements are documented, evidence is recovered, and witness statements are taken. Then we do any follow-up investigation. We take it to the county attorney for a review. Now, I, of course, would prefer that we should always prioritize people crimes and crimes of violence over property, but you need to have property crimes also investigated because it sets the tone of what kind of enforcement was going to be in that community. One of the things we need to know from the county attorney is, are the officers delivering a case that's prosecutable? And if we insist that it isn't, then we should improve it. The county attorney also needs to have the support of the county commissioners to give him the budget that he needs to prosecute cases. Lots of times cases are gone to plea bargain because we don't have the resources to pursue it. And when we do that, we lose out on justice. So I think we need to do that first of all, to make sure the cases are properly, the crimes are properly reported, taken to the county prosecutor, and that the staff, the sheriffs themselves, have training on how to testify so that they can have successful prosecutions.
Even though the sole discretion of taking a case lies with the county attorney, collaborative effort should be made between the county attorney, sheriff's office, crime victim witness services, and the victim that's involved in the crime. That collaborative effort will help really guide a path towards what justice is for that victim. And justice comes in a variety of different ways. Sometimes that's full prosecution. Other times that's a plea agreement. You know, other different circumstances that they have. So that collaborative effort is pretty important between the sheriff's office and the county attorney's office to find what's best for the victim at hand and the public at large.
Okay, I have another question that I'd like to ask all of you, and we'll start first with Mr. Senior. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure the audience knows that the League of Women Voters is recording this and streaming this, and they have the sole recording and streaming rights. So if you are an audience member that's recording, please don't do that. All right, next. I'm a professor, I can be mean. The next question is, for all of you again, what experience, qualifications, and interests do you have that prepare you for this office? And we'll start with Mr. Senior.
As most people probably know by this point, a lot of that information's on my website. It's joelseniorforsheriff.com. I've got 19 years with the Laramie, Wyoming Police Department, the last 10 of that in investigations. I was on our special response team for over 15 years. I'm currently employed as a criminal investigator with the Wyoming Livestock Board. My biggest interest in applying for this position is because I'm a Wyoming native, Laramie resident. I'm raising my family here, my kids, and hopefully my grandkids. And this is a way for me to continue to contribute to our community and to make it safer and a better place to live.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Again, it'll be somewhat similar. I'm 22 years with the Laramie Police Department. The last 7, I've been a sergeant. I've worked predominantly midnight shift. So I work the shift that people don't usually call at 2 in the morning to tell you you're doing a great job. Usually it's not the greatest things that are going on. I also was on SRT for, I don't know how many years, 6 or 7. I've done a lot of different aspects with the police department as far as field training. I feel like in my sergeant role, you're basically training all the time. I mean, it's a job that I cherish. I love imparting wisdom, I guess, to officers. I think it's important to have experience. And I'm also a great listener. And I learn a lot from 1- and 2-year officers. And it's surprising the information that's out there that you need to stay current with. But I just want to further my career in this county, this city. I've enjoyed serving here. I've enjoyed the people. And I think I can make a difference in the sheriff's office. I think I have the credibility, not only amongst deputies that I work with every day, but all of the law enforcement in this community, whether it be highway patrol, university, whoever it is. I think I can bring everybody together and make it a nice, cohesive unit where we can utilize each other's resources.
Mr. Gladney?
Yeah, I attended the University of Wyoming, got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I shortly began my career at the sheriff's office. And I've had an amazing amount of passion for not only the agency, but this community. I've grown up here. I worked in the jail for quite a few years. I think I said I've been SO for about 6 years now. Worked in the jail. I've seen that side of things. I've seen incarcerated individuals, what that does to impact their lives before and after incarceration. And that's where I really learned to communicate well with people and develop a lot of compassion for people inside and outside, whether they're contacting us or not. I've also been working on patrol now for approximately 3 years. I've seen a lot of calls handled the right way. I've seen a lot of calls handled the wrong way. And I want to see to it that the Albany County Sheriff's Office is responding to calls for service for this community in the best way possible. I know I'm young. Another reason I've also wanted to get my name out into this community. I know there's people on this board that have a lot more years than me, but I wanted to introduce myself to the community, share my thoughts, share my ideas, and go forward and enter into the political realm and see if I can make some larger changes further on in my career.
Mr. Delgadillo?
I have 30 years' experience in policing, in patrol, investigations, community policing itself. Spent 8 years in jail operations where I did everything from intake, classification where you put inmates in with the right inmate. You don't put a misdemeanor with a felony. I did inmate management with administrative segregation. Inmates have rights, so I was a grievance officer, made certain that they were dealt with within the law and departmental policies. Maintains jail security by administering discipline. As an investigator, I've handled every kind of crime from homicide to child abandonment. Identified offenders, wrote search warrants, arrest warrants, all withstood judicial review. As a patrol sergeant, when I worked with field training officers, I had scores of officers coming into the department, and we trained them. I've written over 100, 150 personnel evaluations where people used those evaluations to either get a new assignment or get promoted. I did professional misconduct investigations that were unbiased, thorough, and resolved in a timely manner. I bring life experience and a command of contemporary policing issues to this job.
I've lived in Laramie over 20 plus years. I've found my wife here and raised my family here. I graduated from UW with a degree in civil engineering. I've also worked in the University of Wyoming doing recruitment and marketing. My career in law enforcement has been pretty varied. I've done quite a bit. I have a lot of national certifications as a drug recognition expert, crime prevention specialist, building safety and security through environmental design, lots of certifications in FEMA emergency management, incident command. I'm an instructor in multiple subjects. I teach at the academy. I've spoken at national conferences. Through my career, I've been a school resource officer, a detective, a patrol sergeant, and now sheriff. The main reason why I'm running is because I've worked very hard in the short amount of time that I've been in that office to bring professional, competent deputies back to the sheriff's office and bring professional, competent law enforcement that's community-based to Albany County. And I want to continue that work moving forward through this election.
Mr. Britzius.
Thank you. I came here from the metro Atlanta area. I got my undergrad at the University of Georgia. Came here to go to law school in 2004, and then just fell in love with Albany County and Laramie. It was such a nice change, and such a nice change of pace and good people, and that is really the reason that I want to hold this office. And another main reason is that we have really good people. We have great deputy county attorneys, support staff, crime victim witness. I was a prosecutor in the office from 2009 to 2019. I was chief deputy from 2016 to 2019. I've done just about every kind of case from speeding to homicide. We've established in the office, and I think I have as well personally, a good relationship with law enforcement, with the agencies we work with the defense bar, with the courts. We have a great criminal justice system and juvenile justice system here in Albany County, and my real goal is to keep that going. We really do have a special thing here as far as how the courts and law enforcement handle people, and to keep that going I think is very important. I bring to the table institutional knowledge. I have personal knowledge of most of the main actors in our community, from judges to defense attorneys to law enforcement, and have those personal relationships that I think are key to keeping the office going, and the experience to step in when necessary to help with trials and the day-to-day operations of the office. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all. Mr. Moore, we'll start with you on this question, and this one is directly for the sheriff's candidate, and then I will provide a direct question to our county attorney candidate. So for our sheriff candidates, and starting again with Mr. Moore, would you make any changes to the way the sheriff's office handles mental health crises?
You know, and I've said this before in different interviews, it's hard to sit here and say what changes you're going to make without actually being there. I mean, the basis of all law enforcement is training and policy. Mental health is a big item right now. We all know that. I have a brother, he's paranoid schizophrenic, brother-in-law, paranoid schizophrenic. I know exactly what he needs, what he doesn't need, what can send him up the ladder, what can bring him down. But if an officer responded, they don't know that information. And it's hard to learn clues and develop that skill to recognize mental illness. And it could be a university professor, it can be a 14-year-old kid, it can be anybody. It could be the homeless guy on the corner. I mean, it is very prevalent in the country and in this county, quite frankly. I mean, stating the obvious, I think deputies need to go through crisis intervention training. I mean, that's 100%. Verbal de-escalation has become the hot topic. I went to a train-the-trainer in 2014 before it was even talked about. We've always said, I think all these law enforcement professionals would agree, your mouth is your most important asset. If you can talk to people, you can do this job. And it's super important, especially dealing with subjects suffering from mental illness.
Mr. Gladney.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Mental illness is one of the most difficult challenges, I think, facing law enforcement. Just the vast misunderstanding of how to engage with these people. You know, we come from a place where we want to help everybody, and we want to be able to reach out to them. Like Kurt said, you know, communication is the basis for handling mental health crisis. You know, I would say a lot of the burden in this country is put on law enforcement to tackle these issues with mental health. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're not mental health professionals. We're really not. We're trained in a vast array of stuff, and we're trained for sometimes year on end to get stuff. But I would like to implement some way that we can get mental health professionals from the community, the hospital, to collaborate and put together like a response team of some kind, a team that could respond to where we are to assist us with these types of issues, okay? Because we have not just mental health issues, we got a vast array of stuff we're dealing with. And I think that we need to bring in specialists who can really go into a call side by side, work with one another so that we can get to a resolution. And that I think would best, pay off in terms of de-escalation and minimizing a critical incident stemming from mental health issues.
Mr. Delgadillo?
When I worked in the jail for many years, I was tasked in the back with teaching new deputies how to recognize mental illness. We had many inmates that come into the jail because that's the only facility that will accept them 24/7. That's not the proper place for them. But sometimes they've also involved themselves in some kind of criminal activity. Obviously, all officers need to recognize what mental illness looks like and how to de-escalate it. But the real way to do it is to put them in a community where they get actual up-close contact with people that are suffering from mental illness, so they understand the signs and what it is about. I'm a big believer that we need a public health system that provides mental health services for people to prevent them becoming a problem for the police. Law enforcement is not always a solution. And what we can do is not only train our people, but we can also let our dispatchers and our communication staff know when they're alerted to a certain address, to a certain person, that there's a history there, so they can come prepared, not just one officer or two, but maybe getting some civilian advocacy group to come with them. But that doesn't always work. And in my turn, when I was working, I lost 6 officers to mentally ill patients that killed them. So I know how it can turn so volatile. But there is a way that we can work on it.
Mr. Applehans?
2 of the major changes that I've began to implement at the sheriff's office to handle with mental health crisis, mental health incidents. The first one is training, trying to get more mental health training with our detention deputies so that they're able to recognize more of the mental health issues and then navigate our mental health process that we have through clinics and hospitals that we work with, especially when we're doing emergency detentions within the detention center, and also providing more training for our patrol deputies as well to recognize mental health issues and able to de-escalate. The second thing that we've really been working on is trying to have more of an alternate response team to mental health crisis. One of the things that I've done personally is we've applied for a grant for $250,000 through the DOJ to provide that training and those services. I also work with the Albany County Mental Health Board to collaborate with a lot of different entities within Albany County so that we could start to build policies, protocols, and then eventually get the people that we need so that we can have an alternate response that doesn't involve just law enforcement. It can involve more of the mental health resources that those individuals need that law enforcement isn't able to provide.
Thank you. Mr. Britzius, your very own question, and hopefully I capture this. I think I understand the question. What experience do you have with coordinating research for questions? Oh, sir, I'm so sorry. Mr. Senior, please answer the previous question. Don't answer Mr. Britzius' question. I'm sorry. It's the end of a long day.
Agreed.
Go ahead.
All right. I think one of the misconceptions about police response to mental health calls is that they're dispatched as such. Oftentimes, police have no idea what they're actually responding to until they get there. With that reasoning, my goal would be to have every single deputy trained in dealing with people in mental crisis. CIT has been around for quite some time. Right now, I'm currently looking into another program called Miracle that's designed through the NTOA. And I think oftentimes what is a societal problem, people depend on the police to solve. I think as a community as a whole, we need to look at our mental health problems and collaborate together. I mean, I know I've taken mentally ill people to behavioral health on an emergency detention, and sometimes they're released before I've even done my report. So we need to look at getting more of the community involved with providing support to the mentally ill and having more kind of wraparound services for these individuals.
I am so sorry. Please accept my
It's okay.
apologies. All right, now, Mr. Brizius, you get this question. What experience do you have with coordinating research for questions that arise in county committees? And how does your policy for litigation compare to those in other counties?
As far as research for, I guess we're basically talking about providing the legal advice. The county attorney's office really provides two primary functions. One is criminal and juvenile prosecution. The other is providing legal advice to the commissioners and department heads, entities like the sheriff's office. That is our civil role. What we have in my office is right now 2 attorneys dedicated to providing that civil legal advice. They primarily keep up with the contracts that are coming out, whether or not zoning applications or subdivision applications, as the Planning and Zoning Commission come through, whether or not legal advice as to their viability and what would happen one way or the other. In providing this advice, we often use the resources we have provided to us through listservs with other county attorneys' offices who have dealt with issues before. We do independent research on our own. The Attorney General's office also is a resource. They have attorney generals that are dedicated to supporting the civil aspect of the county attorney positions, so we can gather the information we need to give the commissioners and other heads of departments and elected officials proper legal advice. In the end, the decision is not ours. We are simply providing them legal advice as to the possible outcomes and legal challenges that may arise given whatever decision they choose to make.
Thank you. All right, this next question for our sheriff candidates, we'll start with Mr. Gladney. And you guys on this end, keep me honest when we come back around. So this question there's a similar question for both candidates or both offices. What qualities do you seek in new deputies? So we'll start with Mr. Gladney.
Yeah, so when looking at new deputies, I like to, first and foremost, would like to see that they're honest. Integrity is the number one thing that law enforcement is based on. You can't be a cop if you lie or if you're untruthful to the public. The second attribute that I would look for is compassion. You have to be compassionate in order to complete this job. You can't go into a call just thinking, oh, I got a badge, I'm full of power and authority. You have to look at an individualized situation from all parties' perspective. And I think being able to remove yourself from that situation and kind of look at everything from outside the box and look at all the resources that are available to you so that you can perform this job to the best of your abilities. It's also going to take somebody who is obviously physically fit. There's a lot of things that we have to do in this job that is very physically strenuous. And I would also say I would like to see a very strenuous background check in terms to check for past criminal charges, whether they be misdemeanors, felonies, etc. And I think it's also very important to make sure that they pass a vigorous mental health background check. This job can be very traumatizing, and it's okay for deputies to undergo some mental stress, but those deputies need to be well-rounded, compassionate, and have good integrity.
Thank you. Mr. Delgadillo.
Clearly, honesty is very important. But when I look at someone, I look to see about their life experience. How have they lived their life? What do their friends, their parents, their neighbors say about them? Do they take initiative? Do they take responsibility for their actions? Have they shown through their life that they're continually growing, learning? They're independent thinkers. That's very important because in policing, all we have is our word. When I go before the county attorney, I raise my hand in a court of law. If I have integrity, I win that case. There will always be more people than me there, so I have to be the person with this stellar background and performance. So I want somebody that's lived life. They may have made some mistakes. We have to look at those in the context of overall, how they behaved in their lives. But I think life experience is very important because that brings the understanding that you need when you deal with the public. You can recognize their issues, their pain, and you can figure out ways to deal with them. But you can only do that if you've lived that yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Applehans.
The qualities that I look for in the deputies that I've hired so far, first and foremost, is problem solving. We come across a lot of different situations with a lot of different outcomes, and we need to make sure that the people that are on our staff are able to solve those problems, look at all the situations, and make the best outcome. The second thing that I usually look for is communication skills. A lot of these calls, you have a lot of different people from a lot of different areas coming from a lot of different circumstances. It's important for deputies to be able to communicate with a wide variety of different people in a wide variety of different ways so that they can solve those problems. Honesty, integrity, empathy are the other things that we look for, making sure that they're able to essentially put themselves in other people's shoes when they go to those calls as well. And then meaning to those minimum standards of having a clean background so that they can have that honesty and integrity when they go to court to present those cases there as well. So those are the things that I look for with the deputies that we've hired.
Thank you. Mr. Senior.
As a detective, I did probably over 100 background investigations, and I probably saw more candidates not get hired because they chose to tell a fib and a lie about something that otherwise would not have disqualified them. Obviously, you know, from this panel, you can understand how important honesty and integrity are. That's always going to be the forefront of selection when you're looking for a quality police officer. And the other thing I look for is the ability to think outside the box. Like a lot of these guys said, when you go to a call, you're really solving a problem, and sometimes that solution isn't your everyday, you know, this is how we've done it 100 times. You got to be able to come up with an ideal solution that works for everyone. And tenacity. Tenacity is another thing that I like to see in our officers. A lot of investigations become long, drawn-out ordeals, and without tenacity, you're going to have an officer that will give up and not reach a conclusion, and that's not acceptable.
Thank you. Ms. Moore.
Okay, thanks. Obviously, extensive background checks. It is a really difficult time to hire people in law enforcement. You've probably seen it on the news. You've seen mass retirements, mass resignations. It is a difficult process to get a deputy and officer hired and then out where they're actually doing the job on their own. It can be a 14-month process. And you have all that time and energy invested, and sometimes they can go on one call and they're like, I'm out. I've seen enough. And I mean, that's how fickle it can be. But all the obvious things, integrity, honesty, I mean, that's a given in our job. You have to have that. If you don't have that, you have nothing else. You must have that. But yeah, just a great vetting process, and make sure the time you have invested in them will then help the community going forward. But it's very difficult to find qualified people with everything that's been going on with legalized marijuana and things like that. If there's some kind of drug policy, then you can't hire them. So it's become difficult in that arena. But we just do the best we could and try to get the most qualified people and the most honest people.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We're going to stand by. We are swapping timekeepers. So, Mr. Pritzi, it's a similar question. What qualities do you seek in new hires?
When hiring a new deputy county attorney, as with the deputy sheriff, the first things are integrity. In the legal world, it's called ethics. Above all, they have to be ethical. That means we don't play cute and hide the ball. We are prosecutors. We wear the white hats. We are ministers of justice, and they have to have the integrity to uphold that. We have the duty to turn over the evidence to the opposing counsel, to listen to what opposing counsel has to say, to take in a variety of factors. And I think Mr. Delgadillo said empathy. Often for people that are charged with crimes, they are people. You have to be able to understand maybe they're decent and just made a bad decision. At the same time, when the crime is severe or the individual is a danger to the community, you have to have what it takes to hold a case through and not be scared to go to trial and to push the thing if it need be. Being a prosecutor is a lot of power. You have a lot of subjective power, so you have to be able to weigh things out, weigh out the defendant's criminal history, the crime that he committed, what impact this will have on the community, and offer a reasonable plea agreement that both protects the community and at the same time works towards rehabilitation of the defendant. When hiring new deputies, I do like some varied life experience. Oftentimes, attorneys go back and forth from defense and prosecution. I do think that is helpful. So you can see both sides of things, and you're just not closed-minded and just pushing ahead no matter what. You also have to have the integrity to keep the respect of the court.
Thank you very much. This next question, I think, is something all of the positions could have varying answers to, so I'm going to ask it of all of you. I'll start with Mr. Delgadillo. So what do you consider the most important metric to show the effectiveness of the position you are running for? If it is an acronym or in jargon, please describe it.
Could you clarify that for me? I'm not sure what you mean.
So the questioner asks, is there a metric that you would think shows the effectiveness of your office if you were elected sheriff? What would be one or two metrics that you would try to hold up as the thing you want to accomplish?
Well, I think the first one is community trust. With community trust comes participation with the police when there's a crime, when there's an issue in the community. They come forward. They have confidence that the police will work with them, and they feel that it's worthwhile to get involved, to be a witness, to testify if they need to. And they only do that if they have trust in the police. And how do we build that trust? Well, first of all, we have to say that all people are equal before the law. All arrests, all investigations are done without bias and within the law. And we treat people with respect, compassion, but in full recognition of their constitutional rights. If we do that repeatedly, and we also self-police, we will build that community trust. They will participate, we'll lower our crime rate, we'll have better effective policing, not just in the law enforcement aspects, but in other social issues that come up. The thing to emphasize with me is that not everything is a police issue. Sometimes we have to step aside and give it out to other agencies to work on, advocacy groups, people in the substance abuse community, mental health community. That doesn't lessen me as a police officer. It allows me to use the resources that are there.
Thank you. Mr. Applehands?
I think your metrics can be measured in two different ways. One that actually can be measured and another one that is kind of anecdotal. The first one is a reduction in some of the crime statistics that you have, and an actual reduction in crime. You're taking some of the some of the tools, trainings that you have to try and like reduce some of the crimes that we have. So an example would be like fatal crashes, where you're implementing different types of enforcement strategies, education strategies, engineering strategies where you can reduce those. The second thing that I think is a good metric is definitely community trust. Like I said, and that's a little bit hard to measure. But if your community has confidence that you have professional, competent law enforcement that's working for you, that's really kind of what it's all about. You're there to serve the public. And so having to have that public response saying, hey, we trust in you guys, we trust in the things that you do, is important. So the last one is definitely financial responsibility within the office and making sure that you're making the best use of all of the county funds and the taxpayer funds to the best of your ability. You're not misusing it, and definitely not overusing it. So those are the metrics.
Mr. Britzius, please feel free to chime in. You also, no doubt, have metrics.
Thank you. I believe as far as metrics, there is one danger in using metrics, because I've seen it before, is you can't get too caught up in just straight statistics. I think you have to look at broader things, like Mr. Applehand said, a reduction in crime, community trust, and generally accomplishing the goals of your office, which is always bringing down crime. When we're looking at what crimes to prosecute and how to go forward in cases, community impact is always one of the key factors. What impact are we going to have on our community prosecuting one person opposed to another? An example would be a local person that is dealing methamphetamines versus someone who is on I-80 just trafficking drugs to another jurisdiction. Where do you need to put your focus? Where do you need to really have the greatest community impact? The best way to see that is in whether or not the crime rate is going up or down, whether or not the case numbers are going down. We do track our cases, so we have some idea of whether or not we're seeing a rise in, let's say, methamphetamine or domestic violence or sexual assault, and we can get some understanding of how we are doing as far as preventing crime in the community and making sure we're putting the proper focus where it needs to be. Those sort of metrics, I think, are much more important than, let's say, numbers alone, and I think keeping track of the caseload, keeping track of where the crimes are coming, where they're going, and heading them off if you can see things coming. Those are some very important metrics that we have.
Mr. Senior. I will never forget you.
So when evaluating the effectiveness of the sheriff's office, I think it's important to consider when you bring a new sheriff in, if they're doing a good job and they're successful, you might actually see your crime statistics go up. If they have motivated, aggressive patrol officers out there doing their jobs, you're going to see more arrests. You're going to see more cases going through the court system. However, I do definitely agree that community trust is probably the best way to measure how successful your agency is. With community trust, you're going to get more buy-in. You're going to get more people reporting crimes to you, knowing that they'll be handled correctly.
This is hard. Like you're basically repeating everything people say when you're the 10th person going or whatever. But
Sorry.
I'm going to say it. Yes, community trust. I'm not a metric type person. That we do have stats. I mean, you see them every day. Crime stats. I would agree with Joel. You can't base everything on that because there is truth to that. If you have aggressive people out there and they're getting drugs off the interstate or whatever they're doing, the crime, it's going to show that it's going up. We need to be community-based, focus on the community at hand, and part of that is keeping things like that out of our community. I think the sheriff's office presently, I work with those guys. I hear them on the radio. They do a great job. It's a lot of things that the citizens don't see or hear about, but there's a lot of good that's going on. Unfortunately, in law enforcement, a lot of times it tends to focus on the bad, and that's unfortunate, but that's part of the job. But I think the community as a whole does like our law enforcement and trust it, and we just need to enhance that more and provide them with any opportunity to consult or whatever they think would be better for that open line of communication.
Yeah, I'm last. Yeah, I mean, of course, transparency. I mean, if you can get the community on board with everything you're doing, you got a pursuit, you got some big felony bust. Like, if the community understands what's going on and they understand why you're doing it, then you can gauge how well you're doing through community feedback. I would like to say something the senior said about, crime stats. You look at crime stats, well, you can look at recidivism rates, going down, which are good, but you will also see an uptick in the amount of felony misdemeanor cases. I mean, right now at the sheriff's office, we have a group of guys, people, myself included, who are just hammering criminal interdiction. We're seizing drugs every single day. We're getting felony warrants. We're taking a lot of really dangerous people out of this community, and the community just carries on about their day, and they don't really get to see this or hear about this type of information. Last night, for instance, we had I won't get into that. But yes, I would like to say that crime statistics are important, but you can't focus too much on the crime statistics themselves, because crime statistics are specific to which region you're in, and they can be skewed in a lot of ways. So I would say basically, having the community be completely on board with what you're doing so that they know what you're doing and you can get their feedback as to whether you are succeeding or not succeeding. That's what I would say.
Excellent. So our next question will start with Mr. Applehans. And this questioner wants to know, what is the top budget challenge to the Albany County Sheriff's Office, and how would you streamline expenses?
One of the top budget challenges that we have at the Sheriff's Office is really the county budget, so the amount of tax money that we get in that's divvied out to the Sheriff's Office that we can use for everything: salaries, equipment, training. That's limited because of our population, our tax structure, a lot of other factors go into that. So one of the ways to really streamline it is to take that money that we have to come in, and like I said, really use it as efficiently and as effectively as possible. The other way that you can use to streamline the process is to try and get financials, monies from other different areas, utilizing grants either from state government, federal government, any other type of outside agencies to supplement the budget that you have there, and really utilize those opportunities to increase the amount of equipment, training, opportunities that you have for the office. And so, like I said, major challenge is the amount of money that we come in, and the way to really streamline it is to look for all the other different opportunities, all the other different funding streams to come in to help supplement some of the challenges that you have within the office.
Thank you. Mr. Senior.
So two of the major expenses with any law enforcement agency are the hiring of new personnel. When you hire a brand new guy, that expense starts right away as far as outfitting them with all their gear and providing them all of their training from that day until, 14 months later when they're finally capable of handling a call on their own. What I see is a lot of wasted time and funds by not doing a thorough selection process on the people that are hired. We need to be selecting candidates that are likely to make it through that training and stay with the agency for a long time, and do our best to retain the people that are already there and trained and working. Another way to save money in the training aspect is to send your deputies to a train-the-trainer type training so they can come back certified and capable of training your other deputies rather than having to send the whole agency out of town or out of state for training.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
I guess I can't personally speak on the sheriff's office budget presently, but obviously training takes up a lion's share of a budget. Hiring, like Mr. Senior said, huge amounts of money and resources, and you have to be very diligent. I mean, it's your money. It's the taxpayers' money, and they want to know what it's going towards. You got to be super open about it, and you got to just find those niches where you think it can be applied best. Certainly, Sheriff Applehunt's mentioned federal grants. I think they're out there. I think one priority, I'm not sure if the county has a grant writer, but get somebody trained in that, because there is money out there, and there's money for communities our size. And if you can get that, it kind of takes the burden off of the county residents, and maybe that money can be, deciphered amongst other departments. But budgets are big issues, and like Joel said, you can spend $70,000, $80,000 trying to get somebody hired and through. And then there's really no commitment from them. If they decide they want to take another job, it's gone. So you have to be very diligent in who you get and what you provide money for.
Thank you. Mr. Gladney?
Yeah, not only does it cost a lot of money to hire and retain people, it costs a lot of money to give law enforcement the necessary equipment they need to better serve the community. The equipment is expensive. We're talking vehicles, search and rescue equipment, snowmobiles, four-wheelers, things of that nature. Those are very pricey items. However, I do think that those type of equipment, they need to be prioritized because if you want a sheriff's office to be able to serve this community to the best standard that you're looking for, we need the best equipment to do that with. You look at a lot of agencies across Wyoming who are just dead broke. They don't have the funds. That's understandable. I think here in Wyoming or in Laramie, we have a very good group of people who can work with our money, and as your money, it needs to be deviated accordingly, and it needs to be deviated to what fields you want your money to go to. I would just like to really hit on that equipment. If you want us doing a good job and you want us serving and you want us out there, we're gonna need the stuff to do the job with. And we're also gonna need that money to hire and retain people. But yeah, budgets are very tricky. I'll be honest. It's not my forte right now. I've been here 6 years, but there's people that know how to do it, and I plan on using those resources.
Thank you. Mr. Delgadillo?
First of all, I have information regarding the budget just from public sources. I'm not inside the agency, so I can't see how the money is really being apportioned and used. But one of the things we have to look at is how much overtime is being used by the deputies. Many times, it's cheaper to put people on overtime than to hire a new person. But that overall, that's not a good strategy because you don't replace people, and after a while, you burn them out. Second thing is what we need to do is make sure that anytime we're involved in an activity where there's reimbursement, that we claim that. Many times, agencies in the past, they would respond to a multi-agency event, and they didn't put in the proper documentation, and there was funding for that. Third, we also have to go to the county commissioners. Policing is not something where you can always do more with less. There's minimum staffing requirements for everything. Just to maintain the jail, you have to have certain staff. There has to be programs there. We need to have more funding. Where does that money come from? It could be a reallocation for maybe a nonprofit to the jail, to the sheriff's office. Those are the immediate sources of money that we could find.
Thank you. Mr. Britzius, your very own question completely outside of budget. What criteria do you use to call a grand jury?
This is going to be a short answer because in the state of Wyoming, it is the practice to file a charge by complaint or information, not by a grand jury. I only know of two that have happened the 15 or so years I've been an attorney. One was in Casper that was for a large drug case that the federal government would not take, and the other was in the Robbie Ramirez shooting. I was not a part of that. It is not the way we charge crimes in the state of Wyoming. Every jurisdiction is different. The federal government only charges really by grand jury in federal cases, and occasionally complaints or informations, but not often. And other states do things differently, but in Wyoming it is very rare for a state prosecutor to call a grand jury.
Thank you for that answer. Here's a question that is directed at both offices. So I will ask it and ask Mr. Britzius to potentially go first, and then ask our sheriff candidates. So this questioner wants to know, following an officer-involved shooting that results in a fatality, how should your office handle that case? What role does transparency play in communicating with the public?
After an officer-involved shooting, the Division of Criminal Investigation is the primary investigating agency. They step in because, of course, we don't want anyone thinking that special treatment is being given. It's a state, generally a division that is not part of the local group. So DCI is what it's known locally, known kind of colloquially, is split up, and they will find somebody that doesn't work our region, send those individuals down. They will become the investigating agency. It then is up to the prosecutor on how to proceed once the evidence is presented. Very often, the prosecutor will follow recommendations. DCI basically presents the evidence to the prosecutor, and a determination is made whether or not the officer-involved shooting is legitimate or not, whether or not it is justified. If there is some issue going on in the community, the prosecutor has the right to appoint a special prosecutor. That is to bring a prosecutor from outside the community that has no relationship with the local agency of which the officer that did the shooting is concerned. That can be helpful in some cases, but it is not generally the standard. The standard is for the prosecutor in the jurisdiction to make the determination once the Division of Criminal Investigation has actually presented its evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Senior.
I think Kurt answered the procedural question very well, so I'm not going to repeat that. What I am going to talk about is the importance of transparency and release of information should there be any critical incident, really. It doesn't have to just be an officer-involved shooting, but on any critical incident, it's important that the sheriff's office releases factual information that they can release at that time. There are reasons, however, specific to officer-involved shootings where you're going to have to withhold a lot of information. You might be able to say that there was an incident and have to withhold most everything else. And part of that is that if the deputy was involved in a bad shooting, you can't compromise any future trial that Mr. Britzius would be prosecuting. And also you can't compromise that deputy's defense either. So I think it's just important that that information's put out as quickly and as accurately as possible.
Mr. Moore.
Mine's going to be short. Same thing. I mean, as a process, it's pretty universal how it goes with an officer-involved shooting. It's a separate agency that's not involved, that has to investigate it, and then it's determined if it's justified or not. We also have to take into consideration the deputy officer involved in it. You know, that's a trying time for them, and you need to take care of your people as well and make sure they have the resources, mental health, whatever it might be. Because a lot of times, I mean, there can be shootings and then maybe that officer takes their own life because of what happened. I mean, there's a lot of intricacies with something as traumatic as that for both sides, for the person that maybe died in an officer-involved shooting, the officer involved. It's a very traumatic incident, but obviously you have to get it out there. You have to let the public know what's going on as much as you can without compromising whatever investigation's taking place, and just keep people informed.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be completely transparent without giving names. You know, I think the public deserves to know if there's a critical incident. I've seen in the past, past administrations, I've seen officer-involved shootings resulting in a fatality. And it's ridiculous how it was handled. The public didn't have any idea what was going on for weeks, months after the incident. And I don't understand why the public shouldn't be let in on that. I get protecting the names, yes. You know, getting into an officer-involved shooting is a very difficult thing for everybody. It's the last thing we want as law enforcement professionals. I will say, though, that full transparency plays into that. It's huge. You know, then people stop. You know, they may not assume stuff. They may not, you know, they might be sitting there and coming up with their own story of what happened, and then the rumors start, and it's just, it deviates from the facts. So, yeah, I would like to see transparency with that. So that's all I gotta say.
First of all, I do agree with the county attorney's approach. That's the way it's done. In an officer-involved shooting, we have to be mindful of not only the person involved, but the victim of this. We want to make sure that not only do we find a legal finding, but a just one. One of the problems that happens is that sometimes the community doesn't have faith in its police officers. They don't feel they're credible. They feel that because of other prior activities, things in the past, that they should question it just a little bit more. During an investigation, you can only release that information that would not in any way jeopardize that investigation. And sometimes people don't take that as a proper answer because they feel you're withholding. But why are you? Because you have a past in your community where you didn't respond to other kinds of complaints. There wasn't transparency. There wasn't an investigation that was unbiased and thorough. And as a result, you question this one. But I think if we work together to rebuild the reputation of the Sheriff's Department and the reputation of in the eyes of the community, when such a things happen, people will be satisfied to wait to see the resolution of that investigation. And they'll give us not the benefit of the doubt, but just the amount of time to wait to see how it works itself out.
Just to kind of echo what Kurt said as well, you need to bring in an outside agency to come and investigate, and that would be the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. Then as agency head, making sure that you turn over everything that you need to cooperate with that investigation and notify the public as to the specifics of the investigation that you're legally allowed to disclose, and then allow the due process to go on both ends, both with the officer that's involved and victim's family that's involved in the shooting as well. And then one of the most important things is to keep constant communication throughout that process, not just an initial statement and then no more communication. Definitely updating the public as you go through that process, which can be long. On where they are, any updates that you're able to release, specific dates that they can look forward to, whether that's court dates, and then pass the resolution and kind of in that reunification stage as well after it's been resolved, and making sure that you disclose everything to the public, let them know what happened, and any improvements that need to be made or any things that you did well.
Thank you. I believe by my watch we have room for one more question if I collapse a whole bunch together. But what I'd like to offer, Lynn is coming, maybe that's not true. There are,
Ask if they want to go longer because there's so many questions.
could I do two questions? Can I do two? Okay, I'm going to do two. She gave me permission, if that's all right with you all. Okay. So, thank you. I want to thank all of you for the large and wonderful number of questions. There are some really great ones, and I think you all might be interested to read through some of them as well, just to see what your constituents or your potential constituents are thinking about. So I'm going to do two, because this was going to be a challenge to cram those together. This is still going to be a challenge, but I'll try. So for all of you, and we'll start with Mr. Senior, many of you have mentioned being community-based. Can you define what that term means to you? And then what are your specific plans to build public trust within Albany County?
Sure. I think it's especially important to understand there are some differences between a sheriff's office and a police department. The police department is where I've spent most of my career. However, I do recognize those differences. You know, obviously the sheriff's office is led by an elected official. To me, that means that that person is directly responsible to the people that put him in that position. With that being said, that person should be accessible to the public. They should have an open door policy, and they should listen to feedback from the public. As far as building back community trust, you know, there's been a lot of talk about a civilian review board. Personally, I don't think that's a good fit for our community. One thing I am looking into and may implement would be national certification through or accreditation through a program similar to like CALIA or another organization that would strengthen, you know, the policy and procedure of the sheriff's office and their training requirements, hiring requirements, things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, all of law enforcement needs to be community-based. As he mentioned, you know, as a city officer the majority of my career, it's easy to get out of your car and walk around and talk to people. When you're a deputy and your main jurisdiction is in the county, that's a little more difficult to go out and go 20 miles out on a ranch to meet every rancher or whatever the case might be, but it's attainable, for sure. As far as, and you mentioned like the citizen observation boards and stuff, it is, I think that would be difficult. And that's been a question a lot from different media types. I'm not totally close to it, but I think, and I mentioned this before, that members of the community that wanted to be involved in it would have to do some kind of training to see what officers, deputies have to go through. And then they could provide some insight on some things. But until then, I think it's difficult when you haven't done the job to be able to provide what you think should happen on certain instances. So.
Yeah, I agree. You know, being community-based, I mean, I think we should be tailoring how we conduct our jobs based on what the community really wants. You know, you talk about, you know, transparency that would allow the community to be more involved in that. Part of my plan for being more transparent would be to have like a weekly or even a daily forum / press release for any critical incident that we have. And I wouldn't want to just spread, you know, the critical incidents and the negative stuff. I'd like to share the good things that come out of our job too, the positive contacts, the lives that are saved, the searches that were successful, things of that nature, you know. And I think a big part of that is, this day and age, is sharing also evidence. You know, you look at video footage, electronic footage, audio, video. You know, we still have a lot of vehicles that don't have in-car cameras. And we need cameras in every single vehicle. We need every single deputy to have a camera so that when we have an incident, when we have something good, I would like to share that with all of you. And if there's issues, we can talk about it afterwards. And so if there is an issue, we can remedy that. I think that's the basis for being a community, a sheriff's office in this county. And I'm looking forward to changing that and heading in that direction with all of you.
I think a sheriff's department, police department should reflect its community. We have a diverse community. It should be reflected there in the department. That brings different points of views, and that's important. Inside the sheriff's department, I think you need to, first of all, you need to have a strong chain of command. The sheriff has to give the authority to the people in the chain of command to be able to supervise, manage, and discipline their subordinates. We need to have a code of conduct. How we treat each other is how we're going to treat the public. We need to emphasize the duty to intervene. If an officer sees something that is excessive force or something that's irregular, they have a duty to intervene. Perhaps not physically right there on the scene, but to practice the concept of being a good witness. That's important for us to restore our integrity and our reputation as officers. And then when we work with the community, people will understand that we're a well-behaved professional force. They will want to work with us. Officers want that. Officers want the recognition of the community for the good work they get in a non-politicized environment where there isn't cronyism or favoritism in getting job promotions or moving to different assignments. By doing that, we can rebuild this agency and make it more reflective of the community and more responsive.
Community-based policing involves listening to the public and heading your agency to where the public would like to see. And that comes from a variety of different ways, whether it be just taking some of the comments or the complaints that you get, and then tailoring your force to go out and solve those problems for the community. It's collaborating with a lot of other different community organizations and entities that we have here so that you can, like I said, provide different resources for the people that we come across in the criminal justice system that we have, and the calls that we have as well. Building trust comes from not only that community policing and reaching out to your community, and they can see that you're following through with what it is that that they're looking for, the type of law enforcement that they have, but also being transparent in terms of the things that you're doing, whether they're good or bad. Taking that action and then letting the public know. Some of the things that we've seen in that sheriff's office since taking over is, like we've talked about in terms of purchasing some of the equipment, some of the personnel changes that we've had, looking at some of the solutions to some of the lawsuits and things that that was inherited from the last administration, and letting the public know that your office is there to provide the best service that they possibly can and take that action moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
For a prosecutor's office, it's a little bit more difficult because we don't have that face-to-face contact like law enforcement does on a daily basis. We live in the courthouse. That is primarily what we're doing. And our biggest, I guess, interaction with the community generally comes down to victims of crimes and witnesses in crimes. And we have the Crime Victim Witness Program that really is our first line of contact with meeting with victims and making sure they're being supported and making sure witnesses understand what's going on. And from doing that, we do get a good sense of what the community does see as important. Another thing that we are able to do is we have the single point of entry system with the juvenile law, where juveniles are basically, they are taken before a team of stakeholders. That includes the school district, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Cathedral Home, people that work with juveniles and provide wraparound services to families that may be in trouble or in need. And we, as a team, can come up with a recommendation of how we think we can best serve this juvenile and their family, and what we can do to really help those folks, as opposed to just putting everyone straight into juvenile court and the juvenile court system. That has been very successful. Working with the Mental Health Board, there are a lot of different individuals and entities involved there, so we can get a better sense of where the community wants to go with mental health. And just speaking with private citizens as they come by, we're always happy to talk to anyone who wants to give us our 2 cents and get a better sense of what the community does want.
Okay, thank you so much. You're almost there. One last question. So I will, again, this is 2 that I will try to collapse into 1 and make appropriate for both offices. So we'll start with, I should have started with Mr. Moore last time, I'm sorry. So you get to go first this time, and get it over with and drink your water. What training priorities will you have for your deputies, and what resources do you need or do you use to manage the specific stress of law enforcement or law enforcement?
Well, we touched on it earlier. I think we've talked about the mental health situation, crisis intervention training, very important. It was actually provided here just this past December, right here in Laramie. And I actually went to that one with some other folks. I was actually disappointed in the turnout. I think there was 10 of us, and the training was right here in Laramie. I mean, the first thing I do is have a training and make it open to 50 to 100 people, law enforcement. And we actually had non-law enforcement in there. We had a graduate student that wanted to learn more about it. So it was super disappointing to me that there wasn't more law enforcement there, and I'm speaking as a law enforcement person. God, I lost my train of thought. What else? What was the question again? I started talking mental health.
I did too. What resources do you need or do you use to manage the specific stress of
That's right.
law
That's right.
enforcement?
Okay. I know personally, I work out, I run. That's a stress reliever for me. People have different ways of relieving stress. I think when we mentioned it, like with an officer-involved shooting, you have to provide resources to your officers. There are programs out there. I know with the city, I'm not sure with the county, you get up to 4 mental health visits a year and sometimes more. It's all part of your package for your benefits, and that's important because, you know, being 22 years in this business, law enforcement tends to take I can handle it. I'm tough. I can take it, but you're not. It sticks with you for a long time, if not your whole life. So it's something that needs to be addressed.
And I'm sorry, can you go ahead with the first part of that?
You bet.
All right. Loaded.
So what would your training priorities be for your deputies, and how do you manage stress?
Okay, I think I can tackle that. All right, so in terms of training, I mean, I kind of want to piggyback on what he said. You know, right now at the sheriff's office, our guys are very well trained in a vast array of stuff. We do our job good. The academy provides good training for us, and we try to go out of our way to pick and choose certain trainings to go to. But I would say right now, I would like to see mental health training implemented a lot more. You know, I haven't seen mental health training recently for the agency. I'd like to see more training in that aspect, and I would also like to see a lot more de-escalation training. A lot of people think it's, you know, de-escalation. It's actually non-escalation. Learning how to talk to people and knowing your legal authority to prevent, you know, unlawful seizures, stuff like that, which lead to critical incidents. So I think, you know, non-escalation training, CIT training, those are definitely on the list for priority items for me. In terms of managing stress, you know, like him, you know, I go to the gym, you know, play video games, stuff like that, drink beer, oh well. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that the agency has amongst us all is ourselves. I mean, we're a very tight-knit group of individuals, and we get ridiculously tight, and we go to each other when we're struggling with stuff. And I think that's our first inclination, and we cling on to each other pretty hard. This is a really tough job, and some of the stuff you see will stay with you until the day you die.
I think it's important for new deputies in particular to get as much exposure to regular citizens, not just crime victims. And many agencies, what they'll do is the first couple of years you're always in the jail and then you go out to patrol. I'd like to reverse that. And the reason is when I worked in the jail, you met a different type of person there. And it could sour you on citizens, especially if you don't have experience with that kind of environment. I think that it's important for people to get as much exposure going out into the public where they're not in a law enforcement capacity, just going to school board meetings, For instance, going to schools, teaching children about bicycle safety, meeting with citizens in commercial districts, talking about businesses and what practices they can practice to make certain they don't get victimized. I think if you do that, you get people, your officers to be well-versed on how to deal with a variety of people. As for the stress of the job, yes, it exists, but I think that you should always partner new officers or officers that are having trouble with a mentor, somebody who can see them through this, someone who's lived it through themselves. If a person's been involved in an officer-involved shooting, and there is a shooting, why not partner that person with them so they get that experience, they know what they went through, and they can empathize and help them.
Training priorities for the Albany County Sheriff's Office are more de-escalation training, definitely more training in mental health response, including mental health first aid, which we've had our deputies start going through this past month, and the crisis intervention training that we have. Other training priorities that we have is in traffic incident management and other kind of traffic-related management trainings. It's one thing that we respond to fairly often, and we want to make sure that we're keeping our officers safe as they're responding to those critical incidents. In terms of managing stress, we've implemented more critical incident debriefs for our officers so that they can kind of work through the situation and create more of a culture to where it's okay to ask for help. The county, through its benefits program, provides up to 6 free counseling sessions for our deputies that we've let everybody know that they can utilize. And then in addition to that, the Sheriff's Office has partnered with another agency to provide additional counseling services to help with stress that's completely anonymous. And so that, again, creating that culture for our deputies to be able to go and ask for the help that they need, get the help that they need, and not feel ashamed of it.
Toss up. Whoever gets the microphone first.
So as far as a prosecutor goes, our training tends to be more on the trial side and ethical side. The commissioners fund us very well for training, so we're able to send people off for training as well through grant funding to improve our skills with prosecuting things like sexual assault, domestic violence, drug interdiction cases, driving while under the influence, and other crimes. We have a lot of opportunities through the state of Wyoming as well. They have a NHTSA attorney who will provide trainings as far as DUIs and traffic offenses. And we try to send people as much as we can afford off to improve their skills. Primarily in court, it is a complicated process, motions practice, to make sure that they can be successful when we are in trial and prosecuting a case. As for stress, first off, I don't think, though being an attorney, both civil and criminal, is stressful, it is very different from being law enforcement and actually having to go to suicide calls and deal with these sorts of things personally. I don't really think there's a comparison there. Their stress level is much higher than anything we deal with. We have to look at horrible pictures and videos and deal with very tough situations, but not generally be on scene and deal with it one-on-one. I think it was Zeb who said it. My office generally depends on each other for support. We really clean together as a group and really give each other the support we need. We try to force people to go on vacations, even if they don't want to go, they want to keep working, and do our best to make sure everybody gets the private time they need.
Last but not least, please go right ahead.
All right. As far as my training priorities for the Sheriff's Office, obviously we've all talked about the mental health response and recognize that as an issue. The other thing I recognize as an issue is within their investigations unit right now, they've got two individuals that have been detectives for several months. They're pretty green. They're great guys, but they're green. If they were to respond to a major incident, such as a homicide or something, I think they would need some guidance. So I would really like to bolster the investigations division within the Sheriff's Office to make sure they're capable of handling major crimes such as homicides and sexual assaults. and they're able to investigate those correctly and hold those offenders accountable. I would also like to look at their response to tactical situations, make sure, we're capable of responding to, a Uvalde type incident, and that those major responses to super serious incidents aren't the focus. Those are the tragedies within our community that we want to prevent, and the bad people that we want to hold accountable. As far as stress, I work out, I am highly involved with my family, and I have a strong faith.
Okay. Well, your long evening is coming to an end. Thank you all so much for participating and being good sports about the questions and not giving me too hard of a time when I messed up. So I appreciate that. I was asked to give a little brief overview of the questions and how I picked them. And there are, between everything that came in from the league, online, and tonight, there were almost 50 questions, and we only got through 9. So how did I pick? I picked ones that I wanted to have answered, but there are lots of others that I wish I could have had answered. So just to give you a flavor of some of the others. In the event you are not elected, what will you do to add value to our community? Many of you keep mentioning getting the bad guys off the street. What do you consider a bad guy? What considerations factor into your decision to encourage defendants to plead out rather than going to trial? There are plenty of others to choose from here, and I really did want to ask them all. Those were just the ones that I thought might help you differentiate your candidates. So, but there were plenty of other options, and thank you for that. It's wonderful to kind of have to sit here and go, well, I don't know what to go next. So thank you. Lynn. Anything that we should do to wrap up, Lynn?
Yes.
The voice of God is here. Yes, ma'am.
We should thank Ann Alexander. Isn't she wonderful at doing this? And I'll just remind you that we're all volunteers here. Just in case you want to know, I usually do take all these questions and type them up so that we can look at them for the next election. But if anybody else is curious, contact me. All right. We have information about our league and the National League on the back table there. Please stop by. There's also a sign-up sheet. If you're interested in becoming a member or just a volunteer, in the last couple of years, we do a lot more observing of elected candidates, of the legislature. We have a lot more involvement, and there are many, many ways in which we can use our volunteers. Look for the YouTube recording. I'm assuming that it'll be up so fast. We have 2 upcoming forums, and even though there are other forums being held each night at the same time, or almost the same time, we decided that next week's forum will be held at 7, and it's the Albany County Commissioner candidates, the Assessor candidate, and the Treasurer. And then finally, on the 4th of August, it's Senate District 9, House District 13, and the County Clerk. And I would say that one reason why we put the people who were on the last forum there, none of them is in a competitive race in the primary. So we figured it wouldn't prejudice them if you didn't hear from them until almost the 16th. What? That's the one we moved to 5:30. Oh, yes. Did I say that? Oh, we did move that last one to 5:30. And so if you go to our website or the library's website, we've changed our flyer, and it does say 5:30. I'm sure there were other things I was supposed to do here. Oh, yes. For the candidates, I left it there. Want to hand me that sheet? We'll also post your contact information. Now, I know that some of you have full information on Vote 411, but some of you don't. So this is what we have, and if you'd like to just write in something extra, even just like street address, we'll find it. Okay. Well, I thank you all. It's a wonderful turnout. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. Oh, and you can stay and mingle.
All right.
Mingle.
Catch you on the next one.